They laughed behind closed doors, toasted to a future they thought I had no place in. But as they raised their champagne glasses, I received the email that changed everything. Ownership transfer successful. You now control majority. Hi, I'm Emily. I was the quiet one, the so-called number girl they kept in the shadows. But what they didn't know was that I was also the one quietly rewriting the rules and the future. Want to hear how I went from invisible at the boardroom door to signing their termination letters? Trust me, it's the kind of story that hits deep and satisfies even deeper. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments, and if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way, I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. I remember the way Thomas said it, calm, almost bored, like he was telling me the copy machine was jammed again. "You're not needed at this one, Emily," he said, brushing a bit of lint off his lapel. "It's just for decision makers." I stood there, folder in hand, blinking as the weight of those words settled in. I wasn't surprised, not really. But something in me tightened. Maybe it was the way he didn't even look at me when he said it. Or how Martha, our mother, turned away just as I opened my mouth to speak, pretending to be interested in a fake plant by the window. The only reason I even knew about the meeting was because the caterer emailed me by accident. A full menu, wild mushroom risotto, seared salmon, local apple tartlets. I had stared at the screen for a long minute, wondering if I was missing something. I wasn't. Vivian appeared from the hallway, smiling like she always did, thin and polished, like a hostess at a charity gala. "Oh, Emily," she said sweetly, "could you grab a few extra coffees from the downstairs cafe?" "We're a little short." She said it like I was the assistant. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I'd learned something important over the years. Silence is its own kind of power. Through the frosted glass of the boardroom, I saw them. My brother, my mother, Vivian, and David, already seated, laughing, toasting. My name wasn't on any agenda. It never was. I watched Thomas lift a glass of white wine and say something that made Martha smile, just a little. She rarely smiled. I didn't cry, not in that office. Instead, I walked back down the hall to the smaller room I used, tucked between storage and finance. My office didn't have a view, but it had something better. A locked cabinet, a worn chair I had broken in myself, and a desktop with full access to the company's financial systems. I sat, logged in, and clicked through the dashboards. Payroll, assets, accounts payable, all open. They never revoked my admin privileges. Maybe they forgot. Maybe they assumed I was too loyal or too dull to notice. I hovered my mouse over the control panel. So many pathways. So many numbers. Numbers don't lie, and they don't play favorites either. From the hallway, I heard laughter rise again, muffled through the walls. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands, and let a small smile form. "You wanted decisions?" I whispered to myself. "Fine, I'll give you one." While they clinked glasses at brunch meetings and praised each other for half-finished ideas, I was still in the office, building something they didn't know existed. My legacy wasn't flashy or loud. It lived quietly between columns and formulas, one spreadsheet at a time. I remember 3 years ago, David had pitched some blockchain startup to the family, all buzzwords and bright promises. No one understood it, not really, but he had charm. When it crashed, he lost 6 figures. It should have sunk the company. I cleaned it up in silence, created a workaround so the tax records wouldn't scream, filed the corrections. Nobody thanked me. I don't even think they noticed. November in Seattle is all rain and reflection. That night, the office was mostly empty, just me and the flicker of overhead lights. My only companion was the low hum of servers and the soft rhythm of my own typing. I didn't mind. I liked the quiet. It gave me room to think. I had started something new, small at first, redirecting dormant vendor funds into a legal holding account, structured in my name through a shell company. Perfectly traceable. if anyone bothered to look. They didn't. They never did. My inbox was full of signatures I never gave, contracts, approvals, line items that bore my name but not my knowledge. They used me on paper when it was convenient. I created a folder, then another. I backed up every document they touched, every approval I never granted. I labeled the master file contingency. They thought I was just moving numbers, but I wasn't. I was moving foundations, quietly shifting weight, redistributing control, like adjusting a building's beams 1 inch at a time. No one hears it move, but they feel it when it collapses. One afternoon, Thomas asked the IT team to upgrade the building's camera system, new security protocols, remote access. He wanted it all modernized. I volunteered to oversee it. The young technician showed me how to manage the feeds, how to store the data. He didn't ask why I wanted the private access. I didn't offer a reason. I kept my face calm, my voice low, and let them believe I was still the quiet one. Still the sister who stayed late because she had no life. Still the accountant who could be overlooked. But I was watching, learning, building. I clicked open the dashboard again and began a second backup. External drive, cloud, paper. I had copies of everything. Just as I zipped the files, an alert pinged in the corner of my screen. David had just authorized a 6-figure investment under company credit. No approvals, no discussion. I stared at the alert, then slowly leaned back in my chair. The foundation shifted just a little more. The jazz was low, barely a whisper behind me. I sat in my kitchen, barefoot, sipping lukewarm tea from a mug I got for free at a tax conference years ago. The table was clean except for one open laptop and a single legal envelope. Outside, spring sunlight filtered through the glass. It should have been an ordinary Thursday. Inside the boardroom, they were celebrating. Thomas stood at the head of the table, flanked by Vivian and David. A few polished glasses reflected the glow of overhead lights. Champagne was poured. Toasts made. I watched it all unfold through the private security feed. Camera 4, boardroom angle, crystal clear. He was talking about growth, new investors, bigger offices. Expansion, he said, was inevitable. I knew the pitch by heart. I had, after all, been the one who structured the financials to make it possible. And yet, I wasn't in the room. I refreshed my inbox. One new message. It was from the regional manager at the bank. Ownership transfer successful. You now control majority. My thumb hovered over the trackpad. I didn't flinch. No grin, no gasp, just a quiet breath out. For 2 years, I had built this moment. Quietly shifting shares, acquiring dormant votes, setting up the holding company no one cared to investigate. All legal. All mine. They thought I was loyal. No one suspects the girl who handles the receipts. Inside the boardroom, David raised a glass and said something I couldn't hear, but everyone laughed. Even Martha cracked a smile. My mother, who once told me that women should be graceful, not aggressive. As they drank, a knock came at the door. The courier, right on schedule, stepped in with a neutral expression. He handed out the sealed envelopes one by one. No words, just paper and surprise. I watched Thomas furrow his brow, slide a finger under the flap. He scanned the first page, then the second. Silence. Vivian leaned in. Martha adjusted her scarf. David stopped chewing whatever canapé he was working on. From my kitchen, I reached forward and tapped the mic icon on my laptop. "You should have invited me to the meeting," I said calmly. They all looked up at once, eyes wide, scanning the room like I'd entered in person. I hadn't. I didn't need to. Thomas stood up so fast his chair scraped back hard. He stared at the documents, then back at the camera lens above the door. "What is this?" he barked. I said nothing. Vivian reached for her packet. This can't be right," she murmured, flipping pages. Martha pulled her glasses down and read line by line. David blinked like he was trying to wake up from a dream. The papers didn't lie. I now held the majority. Their executive titles were revoked effective immediately. A vote wasn't needed. The restructuring had been pre-authorized under their own outdated bylaws. That jazz in the background? It was Miles Davis. So what? Thomas dropped his glass. The sharp clink rang loud, even through the feed. I watched the liquid spread across the polished table. I lifted my tea and took a slow sip. They didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The boardroom looked different in the morning light. Same polished table, same leather chairs, same city skyline behind the glass. But something had shifted, or maybe it was just me. I walked in slowly, holding the black portfolio under one arm. My heels didn't click loudly, but the silence made every step sound sharp. The room was full, yet no one greeted me. Thomas sat at the head of the table, his fingers steepled like always, but his face had lost its color. Vivian was unusually quiet, fiddling with her bracelet. Martha kept her gaze trained on the window, where rain drew long streaks down the glass. David looked like he was reading a menu in a foreign language. Beside me, my lawyer stood tall and still. His calm was almost clinical. No one in the hallway spoke, but I could see heads poking around corners. Everyone knew something was coming. I placed the folder down, opened it with care, and slid the top document across the table. "This isn't a power grab," I said, looking directly at Thomas. "It's math, something none of you ever respected, until now." He didn't move, just blinked, once, like he'd misheard me. Then, as the lawyer passed documents to each of them, the noise began. Pages rustling, chairs shifting, breaths held. The restructuring plan was simple. Effective immediately, all previous executive titles were dissolved. Their access revoked. New board appointments, new decision structure, all approved within the legal framework of the outdated bylaws they had never bothered to revise. Thomas stood abruptly. "You're bluffing." Vivian reached for his arm. "Tom." "I'm not bluffing," I said. "I'm prepared." David tried to smile. "Okay, so maybe we overstepped, but this is family. We can talk." "No," I interrupted. "We've done enough of that, behind closed doors, without me." Martha finally turned toward me. Her voice was softer than I expected. "Why go this far, Emily? We made mistakes, but you're our daughter." I opened my laptop and turned it to face them. On the screen was a live dashboard. Assets, accounts, contracts, all now linked to the holding structure I controlled. "For years," I said evenly, "you treated me like I was part of the furniture, useful, silent, invisible. You signed my name on things you didn't understand. You laughed when I suggested risk audits. You called me soft." Vivian opened her mouth to respond but said nothing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "From now on," I said, "you don't run this company. You answer to it, and that means me." The room went still. My lawyer handed them each a final envelope. "Termination packages," he explained quietly. "Standard. Generous considering the mismanagement." Thomas leaned on the table with both hands, his jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. David scratched the back of his neck. Martha looked away. Then the receptionist opened the door just a crack. "Miss Saunders," she said gently, "there's someone in the lobby. He says it's urgent." I turned. "Who?" She hesitated. "His name is Ryan Caldwell." I didn't move, just blinked once. Of all the names I expected to hear today, his wasn't one of them. The lobby was all glass and marble, gleaming in the late morning light. I stepped out of the elevator and saw him instantly, leaning against the reception desk like he owned it, even though he didn't own much these days. Same blazer, same watch, same overconfidence. Ryan Caldwell. He turned when he saw me and smiled like it meant something. "Wow," he said, sliding off his sunglasses, even though we were still indoors. "So the rumors are true. You really did take over the whole thing. I guess I always saw your potential." I didn't answer. I just walked forward, hands free, no purse, no jewelry. Just the badge clipped to my belt and a quiet sense of arrival. He chuckled. "You look good, different, confident." "I am," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. He stepped a little closer. I figured we should catch up. It's been, 2 years? 2.5, I corrected. Networking dinner. You left early. He winced just slightly. Yeah, that night was complicated. I had a lot on my plate. You said I wasn't ambitious enough to keep up, I said plainly. Then you left with someone who wore a louder dress. Ryan shifted his stance. Look, I didn't come here to rehash the past. I've been working on something new, a startup, health tech platform, scalable. Early traction's been solid, just looking for the right backing. There it was. He always came bearing flattery first, followed by a pitch. That hadn't changed. I let him speak for another minute, maybe 2. Words like growth potential, pre-seed, AI integration. He threw them out like candy, and then he said it. We're planning to pitch Horizon Capital next week. I looked him in the eye. Don't bother. I approve their deals now. His expression didn't crumble all at once. It cracked slowly like a mask that had been drying too long. He tried to hide it with a laugh, but it stuck in his throat. You're with... I'm on their investment board, I said. 2 seats, technically. We don't rush deals anymore. Just then, my assistant approached from the far corridor. Ms. Saunders, the investor call is ready. Do you want me to hold? I turned slightly. Push it 15. I don't like rushing billion-dollar decisions. The assistant nodded and disappeared down the hall. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it again. The pause stretched. I stepped toward the elevator and turned back only once. You once said I was boring, I said softly. Turns out, boring built everything you want. He didn't answer. The elevator dinged. I stepped inside, turned to face him as the doors slid shut. He was still standing there, frozen. Some people never see the shift until the lights go out. The reservation card read, Saunders Family Dinner, 7 p.m. I arrived at 7:03. It was a private room tucked behind an upscale restaurant downtown. Low golden lights softened the walls, and a long table had been set with autumn-colored runners, small gourds and name cards written in elegant cursive. The kind of place where the air always smelled faintly of sage butter and formality. They were already seated. Thomas looked smaller than I remembered. Vivian sat rigid, her napkin folded neatly in her lap. David gave me a faint nod, his eyes darting anywhere but mine. Martha stood when she saw me, half reaching for a hug she didn't finish. I nodded politely and took my seat at the head of the table. No one commented on the change. No one had to. The last time we tried this, I brought a homemade pie. I'd wrapped it in foil and balanced it on my lap during the Uber ride. When I arrived, no one touched it. They were too busy toasting Thomas for a new client he hadn't even secured yet. I remembered carrying that untouched pie home, colder than when I brought it. This time, there was no pie, just clarity. Small talk came first. Vivian asked if I still drank green tea. Thomas mentioned how quiet the markets had been. David asked if I'd tried the grilled duck. No one brought up the company. Then came the shift. Vivian offered a memory. Remember when you used to label everything in the fridge? Even the eggs? I smiled faintly. I still do. Thomas tried a chuckle. It didn't land. Martha cleared her throat. Her voice was softer than it used to be. We didn't see what you were becoming, she said. None of us did. I looked at her, not with anger, but with the kind of tired acceptance that settles in after years of waiting. What mattered, I said, is that you never cared to look. There was a pause. The clink of silverware filled the space where more words might have gone. Thomas leaned forward slightly. I've been thinking, he began. Maybe I could offer some strategic insight, just advisory, informal. David chimed in. We don't want anything formal, just reconnection. I set down my fork. No, I said calmly. I'm building something better now, without you. Vivian blinked. Martha reached for her wine glass but didn't sip. I rose from my seat slowly, folded my napkin, laid it on the plate. This isn't revenge, I said, looking at each of them. This is clarity. From this moment on, your names live in history, not in our future. No one followed as I walked toward the exit. At the door, I caught a glimpse of Tyler, the junior accountant from the office. He was seated with his own family near the fireplace. He noticed me and gave a small, nervous nod. I nodded back. That meant more than the entire table behind me. Just before I pushed the door open, Martha's voice reached me. "Will you ever forgive us?" she asked. I didn't turn around. I paused, held the question gently in my chest like a glass I didn't want to drop. Then I stepped into the night air, where the cold didn't bite. It cleared. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones we never have. I didn't walk away from my family out of anger. I walked away because silence had already filled that space for too long. In life, we all want to be seen for who we are, not just for the roles others assign us. Dignity doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it arrives when you quietly choose yourself. Forgiveness is a door we may or may not open, but clarity, once found, is a light you don't turn off. If this story touched a part of your own journey, I invite you to share your thoughts or memories. Sometimes just telling it out loud is the first step toward healing.